filling of the blood vessel. And so in this case with Christine, again, I'm going to start conservatively for the first few pulses. So I'm going to start at like a 9. The next thing we have to decide is the cooling. So pretty much for everything, you're going to use strong cooling. Sometimes if I have a really light skin patient that has a very light tan, like macular SK, and I'm just not capturing it enough with going up on the energy or the fluence, I'll bring the cooling back down to normal, just so I'm not protecting the epidermis as much. Or if I have some really fine little telangiectasia or dilated capillaries that are constricting from the chill tip, then I'll go to a normal cooling, but typically in just certain spots. So strong cooling is always your safest bet. And then in terms of the pulse width or the pulse duration, that's the amount of time that the energy is being delivered over. And so think of it as a very short pulse width. It's like a bang. It's like throwing a dart right at the center of your target, whereas a longer pulse duration is a more gradual heating slowly. So sometimes if you have a bigger structure like a blood vessel, that you need to gradually heat up and maintain that heat a little bit longer, as opposed to a little pigmented freckle that you're just going to hit and shatter. So that's how I determine, short or long pulse duration. And I tend to like to start with short. Even with her skin tone, I mean, she's light enough to do short. Again, sometimes in someone who's maybe a little bit darker skin type or melasma prone, to be, again, more conservative, you could start with a longer pulse duration. So we're going to start with a 9 joule per centimeter fluence, cooling strong, pulse width short, and you have choices in terms of how fast your pulses come out. I do like to put it on fast mode, but when you're first starting, you can go at the slower mode, or you can even turn it, off, and just you control it with each finger push. So this with the Lumecca, it's not a foot pedal; it's a finger trigger, and so with each pulse, I'm just going to push on that trigger. So we always keep the machine in standby until we're sure that everybody has their protective eyewear, that the door is closed, the sign is on the door, patient has their goggles, and that everything is ready to go. So Christine, I'm going to start over here on the area in front of your cheek. And so we're going to start with our first pulse. So here we go, 1, 2, 3. Okay, are you doing okay? So 1 to 10. 10's the worst pain of your life. How bad? A 1? Okay, great. And so we're doing Christine's treatment today without any numbing cream. And so, many patients like to have numbing cream, but truly it's not that bad. So for patients who want to do it without numbing, or they get irritated with numbing cream, you can do it without numbing, especially if you're doing gentler settings. Okay, so I'm just going to take a look to see how she's reacting. So I think we have a little bit of room to go, because I'm not really seeing yet much in the way of darkening. And when you first start, you can give it a couple minutes to see how it develops. But just looking at this cheek, I think we can go a little bit stronger. I'm seeing a little bit of it lighting up here, but I'm going to go a little bit stronger. So instead of 9, I'm going to increase the fluence to 10. And then I always like to record the number of pulses I do for every setting. So that way, when we have future treatments, I can kind of look and see how aggressive I was. So we're going to do 15 pulses at the 9 setting. And now I'm going to hit the counter reset so that I know that we're going to go up to a fluence of 10. I'm still going to keep the cooling strong and do a short pulse width duration and the fast pulse mode. All right, so Christine, let me know if we need to adjust anything. Oops. All right, so we're going to come in the other direction now. So here we go, 1, 2, 3. Doing okay? Mm-hmm. Good. So I'm just marching edge to edge, and the crystal makes a little footprint in the gel, which is nice. So it gives you an idea of where you've been and where to place your next pulse. And so I'm not pushing real hard into the skin. I'm literally just making enough contact to feel like all 4 corners have contacted the skin, and that looks great. You're doing okay, Christine? All right, so we're going to keep going. So the question always comes up as to, is it okay to use lasers over a mole? So if someone has a pretty deeply pigmented nevus or mole, I'm not particularly a big fan of lasering right over that, mainly because if that mole were to undergo some changes down the road, you know, we use the surface features and characteristics of a mole to kind of guide us in our decision making. So I know some people do like to laser benign looking moles, but in general, I try not to. So I use this procedure more for freckles, lentigines, macular SKs, active acne, post-inflammatory pigmentation from acne, blood vessels, rosacea, angiomas, scars. And so I often will tell, in fact, I always tell the patient when we're doing it on like macular SKs, because a lot of patients don't know the difference, of course. And so I always explain to them that a macular SK has cells in it. It's more of a true cellular structure. So I can lighten it, but it may not come off 100%, so their makeup still may catch it a little bit. And so that way, again, setting up the proper expectation up front, and I've always tried to take, especially for IPL, before photos, because often patients don't remember what they looked like before, and they'll come in and they say, oh, it didn't work, nothing happened, and then you bring up their photo and they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I had that many spots. And because patients are really used to looking in themselves from the front, not from the sides, and so when we take photography, we're doing side views, straight on views, different angles. And so when we point it out to them, then they're like, oh, that was so worth it, you know. All right, so I'm just gonna take a look to see how she's reacting. And her skin's doing really well. So now we're just gonna do the second pass on the remainder of her cheek. You're doing okay, Christine? And so, you know, the other beauty of this device, 13 years ago, my original photofacial machine died, and I desperately wanted to find a machine that I would love as much as that one, and I actually have to say I found one that I loved better, and for a couple of reasons. One is the handpiece is very ergonomic. I don't have a very large hand, and so this one does not feel overly cumbersome or heavy or bulky in my hand. And they've really designed it well with this curve so that even when you get into the neck area, the curve, you can still see the crystal. So you can see where you are so it doesn't block your view. And with the large spot size and the sapphire chill tip, I mean, it's much more comfortable for patients. It's pretty fast and efficient. And so it really can, you know, this has become like my favorite procedure. So when I get into the side of the nose, I like to do a little bit of an angle against the nose to try and get those capillaries. So we're just gonna put this here. Okay, it's gonna be a little pinch on the side of the nose, Christine. And then I like to do perpendicular to it to kind of catch the little vessels that branch off the side. Great. How are you feeling? Fine, feeling? Good. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to come across the chin. Good. Okay, so now we're going to come into the other side of her cheek. Go ahead and turn to your right, Christine. Perfect. And so again, with the little sideburn hair, so you want to try and avoid that. All right, so we're going to start in front of your ear. Here we go. So the same kind of thing on this side. And sometimes patients will ask, what's that burning smell? Sometimes the little vellus hairs on the cheek, you know, you will, or the upper lip, you know, it will burn a little bit and you'll smell that. But you know, you're not trying to singe their eyebrows or any other parts of hair, as we discussed. So one of the things that, you know, again, just kind of going back in the before and the aftercare, I will never treat a patient that is tan. And so I make that very clear at the consultation that patients have to schedule when they're committed to staying out of the sun for 4 weeks before and after treatment. And so, you know, I'm in Southern California, people are outside a lot. Often we'll do the majority of these types of treatments, you know, fall, winter, and early spring. For the patients that are like me that, you know, hide out of the sun and wear a little burqa all the time, you know, they can treat through summer, but anybody who's even going to be out a little bit, typically they're going to come in too tan. And so that's one of the most important things to screen for. We always screen for any history of cold sores. Anybody who has a history of cold sores is going to get antiviral prophylaxis. And for IPL, I typically do it for 5 days since it's a non-ablative procedure. Okay, so we're going to come up into this area. 1, 2, 3, little flash by the eye. And I also warn patients that even though the goggles are on, they're going to see some transmitted light through the bone. So I'm going to do a little bit here. Because sometimes, you know, that could make someone a little bit nervous because they're seeing that flash. But I always tell them your eyes are protected. This is just a little bit of transmitted light through the bone, and so, you know, not to be alarmed. And especially up on the forehead, sometimes that becomes even more of an issue. And I always like to do like a little blending in the jawline. I mean, Christine has such beautiful skin, you know, she barely has a mark. But for patients that, you know, do spend more time in the sun, you know, you don't want to have that cutoff sign right at their jawline. So I will do a little bit like right under the jaw as well. So I'm just going to go on top of your nose, Christine. 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to push your nose to the side. And again, you can see with the nice angle that they cut out here on the handpiece, you know, you're not knocking into their nose, you're not pushing against their eye. So that's a really big plus. And because the intensity and the power on Lumecca is so strong, I mean, truly, with my original device that I had mentioned, it was not uncommon where I would do a photofacial and then, you know, a month later I would bring them back in to get some of the residual telangiectasia, especially around the nose. And with the Lumecca, with the high peak power and the shift into the vascular spectrum, I mean, I don't actually do that anymore. So that's been a huge benefit as well. So we're just about done on her cheek area. All right, now I'm going to come up into the temple and then forehead. And again, just be real good about staying out of the hairline and out of the brow and away from her tattoo. I'm going to put a little bit more gel on her forehead. So sometimes because the curvature of the forehead and you're trying to get a flat, you know, crystal to be in contact, putting a little bit of extra gel up in this area does help. Go ahead and look straight ahead. You doing okay with the little button, or do I need to adjust that in the back? You're okay. So the other thing, if you are using numbing cream, so I typically will use like a triple numbing with betacaine, lidocaine, and tetracaine. And so it's really important when you remove the numbing to make sure that you remove all of it, because sometimes if you don't, you know, prep the skin fully and get all the numbing off, then when you put the cold gel on, you'll see that numbing again as white on the skin, and You know, you don't want to fire through the white, you don't want to burn the numbing cream onto the skin, so you just want to always make